All right. Eugene Williams, welcome to the GAF podcast. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for joining us and giving us your time. I appreciate it. I appreciate you not only as a guest, but as a returning Guyanese, albeit temporarily. Are you based in Jamaica, right?
I'm based in Jamaica, yes.
Okay, nice. We always appreciate people who come back to share their expertise and help build Guyana and offer some knowledge and wisdom to us here who are in dire need for new perspective. So thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I've been here now going into 3 weeks. And it was about, coming to my sister's surprise birthday party and getting some rest.
Okay.
Um,
Happy belated to her.
yeah, thank you on her behalf. And I've gone on to teaching a workshop in playwriting, which is in progress at the moment.
Oh, okay. Are you doing that under a particular event or?
No, a friend of mine here, Charlene Wilkinson, asked me whether I would like to do this workshop
Okay.
for some friends and others who might be interested. And I said yes, because I had proposed it actually to the School of Drama here, and it went in, I suppose, to the government, somewhere in the Ministry of Education, but apparently I proposed it too late, so they couldn't get it together
Okay.
in time. So I said, well, if that couldn't happen, I'll do it freely for another group who might be interested.
How's the turnout?
It's good. We had the first one last evening, started at 5:30. It's meant to be 2 days. Yesterday, a break for them to do some writing today, and then tomorrow we start up back again, and that's it. It's a good group. A lot of people were really, very interested. Some had written before. Some haven't really written a play, but they've written other things. And it seems to me that they're quite keen, and I'm likely to see everybody back tomorrow.
What do you before we get into you a little bit, like what do you think about what is your philosophy towards writing or creating or storytelling? Like how do you approach that?
Well, as far as playwriting is concerned, I talk about a couple of things that people need to be interested in. First of all, you need to be interested in storytelling, right? Because a playwright particularly is a teller of stories.
Sure.
I like to say that a playwright is somebody with a story to tell, and hopefully, even more important, a story to show. Because nowadays it's coming to see the play. You can do a radio play, but I'm really talking about plays for stage. Same thing for screen. For screen, it's even more important that you show, right? That we see the play evolve in front of us. So that storyteller. So what that means, you got to be interested in people and curious about human behavior. A student of theater, a student of human psychology, student of the stage and how it works. All right. Essentially, somebody who has a creative flair,
Yeah.
and creative use of language.
Is there, I mean, obviously, when you tell stories, you can, when you're talking about people, there's such a wide, vast number of experiences to relate and tell, but when you sort of put that, I mean, your main thing is on the stage, right?
Right.
When you put that on the stage, is there a common thread across all these thousands of stories that you can tell, hundreds of thousands, millions of stories that you can possibly tell? Is there a common thread that exists that is effective in connecting with the audience despite the story being told?
I think so, yes. And much of yesterday was about that.
Okay.
So, for instance, you're writing drama, really. And essentially what that means, human conflict, right? You're writing about a character who is in a mess, a character who has a problem, right? So because the people who come to see your play are people who are coming to see a story first of all, and to see how your character negotiates obstacles, right? Which are the problems in the world, and how that story of negotiating these obstacles, problems, how they get complicated and how they're resolved, which is basically what happens in everybody's life.
Yeah.
Right? So it must be entertaining. It must be educational, informative. So humor is good. Authentic characters are good. And those are some of the fundamentals that would run through the thing. And of course, we want human characters. We want to hear them speak like normal people would, right? And it needs to have, some kind of setting that is familiar. The people need to have some kind of familiarity, that runs through all kinds of plays, regardless of the style, regardless of the genre,
When you encourage people to write, do you mostly encourage to draw on personal experiences, or is the starting point beyond that?
Well, that's one of the things we also addressed. Where the stories come from, right? And your stories can come from all over the place. But inevitably, you're going to find yourself marrying your own experiences with that of what you observe,
Yeah.
what you've learned, perhaps through the media, through movies, through other people's experiences and stories. But the more you know it, in other words, the more it resonates with you and your own life, the better you're able to tell it.
Sure.
So your experiences, yes. I can tell you that I don't call myself a writer of plays. I call myself a maker of plays. I create plays myself. I have created a number of plays with actors. You start with an idea, you do research, and you perhaps talk to people, interview people based on the characters that you want to examine or the problem. And then you start improvisations, a process of devising a play. It takes much longer sometimes than if you're sitting all by yourself writing.
So you basically would let that play out in real time. You come with the idea, it's sort of like a discussion, and then everyone improvises till
Right.
you find the right thing.
Right. So it's pretty much one of the reasons why it is longer and it's more challenging because it's collaborative. It's
Yeah.
a group of people. I'm steering the process, and they are responding to stimuli that I throw in as they work.
How do you prevent the central idea from getting away from you when you do it that way? Because if there isn't complete and total direction given, or at least recorded, how do you sort of maintain the
Initial
integrity
germ of it, yeah.
of your work if there's so much creative input?
Right.
You know,
Well, first of all, you come in with something you want to explore. You start off on a particular platform, and you allow the group to just take off, imaginations, have fun. When you're done with every day, you want to say, what do I have? What is it saying? Is this what I want to say? Is it going in an interesting direction that we want to, in terms of what we want to address? That kind of evaluation, then we make some choices that maybe don't need that one. Maybe we need to adjust. Maybe we need to do some further research. that kind of thing. And you keep that process going. In the process, you will probably learn and change course. That this is not where I want to go. I want to go with where this new idea that has come from the improvisation wants to take us. So you can be at it for a long time, and then make a certain discovery that send you in a different kind of direction. And that happens too with playwrights. I mean, there have been experiences, for instance, where I know, our own Derek Walcott, Caribbean playwright, he spoke of starting to write a play and writing this play for a number of years and can't resolve it. He just hadn't found the complete composition. And then one day he's on a trip from the Caribbean, I think it was to the US, and the idea strikes him. Some kind of stimulus, some inspiration. Yes, this is what I'm really writing. This is where it needs to go. This is what the complete story is. Right? Sits down after that and one day completes the play.
Wow.
A
lot of people struggle with this sort of starting a body of work is maybe a challenging part, but when you sort of when you've taken it to a certain part of development and you hit a wall, and there's problems with inspiration and ideas start to dry up. What is your experience with creativity in that regard? Like, how do you spark new ideas when you hit a wall? How do you reinvigorate your energy that you came with in the beginning? Because sometimes creativity just dies in the middle of nowhere, and you're stuck.
And you get writer's block.
Writer's block. I mean, you've been doing this for years. You've been teaching this for years. What do you tell people who may start a lot of projects or have a lot of good ideas but can't really follow through? Because sometimes it's a hard hole to dig yourself out of. And I'm just saying this from my perspective because I do videography and film. I have a lot of ideas all the time, and I follow through on most of them. But there are a lot where I go pretty far, and then I suddenly hit a massive wall where even after months of arduous work and research, I feel maybe I can't do this anymore, and it kind of becomes where I have to step away and maybe come back to it later. But what is your process like in that regard?
Well, I advise students and writers that I work with that two things getting me out of that writer's block, that wall. One is, if you understand the principles or the science of the art, if you will, that this work needs a certain number of elements, and this is what they are. For instance, a beginning, a middle, and end. Right? That it's the character must have a problem. That the character must have objectives. And the character or characters will come upon obstacles along the way. Some of those principles. Go back to your story and see if those tools in your toolkit can help you to find a way of getting past the block, because it might be something that you don't know yet that you need to go research, you need to go learn about. Because I also say that you can't really complete a work unless you know where it begins and what I call the obligatory scene. That what happens in the end, where there's this climax, there's this crescendo. What is that event?
Yeah.
Before the resolution, right? When you have that, you know where you're going. When you have your beginning, you know where to start. you know, and that beginning is that place where you set up the questions, where you set up the problem, where questions are raised. In the obligatory scene towards the end, it's where the questions are answered. So what questions have you raised? What are the answers?
Yeah.
What's that moment? Then the middle, which is really the body of the play, the major part, will probably come. All right? So that's one way of saying structurally, this is your conventional structure that you're working with. Revisit that and ask yourself these questions. In other words, questions might take you to places where you might find answers to that block. The other way is just leave it entirely and go live. Right? Throw yourself in some, experiential situations that might be similar, might not be. Just have some fun, or go, meditate.
Yeah.
It's
a good piece of advice. I think when you're heavily invested as an artist or a creative, and I suppose that's part of your identity, and you begin to struggle with your work, or at least a piece of body of work that you've invested significant amount of time in. Sometimes, I've seen people have a bit or go through a bit of an identity crisis when, there's not that, it feels like you're not able to do what you're supposed to do. And that's where it becomes tricky, and there's a lot of self-doubt that enters the forum of what you're doing. So, it's always a constant battle. And I think even after, even having a catalog of work, you still kind of repeat that cycle in the next piece. It's never just constantly producing art without some sort of purgatory in there.
Indeed. Yeah. I work with students in a final year BFA program, actors who have to create a one-person drama for their final project that they have to devise through improvisation and devising this thing. They make a play, essentially, a production that they act in, they design, they direct, they design the sets for, and so on. And I watch them go through that process, a process of suffering and creativity. And sometimes you're lost. They feel they don't have anything. They don't know where they're going, And it's when they get into that place, actually, of suffering, right, that they dig deep and they connect with the thing that they wanted to explore in the first place. Then it becomes really human. It becomes really, it is qualitatively nuanced and interesting, and they emerge with a production. Yeah. So I start off by telling you it's not going to be easy, but when you reach that place of, writer's block or creator's block, don't despair. Yeah. Work at it. Have a routine. For instance, all major or most major writers, for instance, whether they're novelists, poets, playwrights, they have a routine. Our own Michael Gilks, who was passed, I remember going to his house with a group of friends, and at about, I think it might have been about 10 o'clock the evening, he said, "Okay, guys, I'm off. Just wishing you guys goodbye. Stick around, have fun." He gone to sleep because he was going to get up at 4 o'clock the following morning to work. Derek Walcott was like that. Allotted time, and you put yourself in that routine, that discipline helps.
So it doesn't help to be the romanticized drunk and, whatever.
That works for some people.
Yeah.
Or it could be a mixture.
Sure.
But the routine helps.
Yeah.
That you enter the routine, and in the case of the playwright who will have questions to answer. Try to find a way. What are these questions that are before me? I like one of the things I like to say to writers is that ask yourself, what is the most significant dramatic question you're trying to answer here? All right? That has a yes or no answer. All right? That the audience is trying to answer as well. Because you've set up that question at the beginning. Will this man or this woman manage to lure or to invite or to win over her son, her husband, etc., in this relationship? Yes or no?
Yeah.
You are taking the audience through a journey of obstacles and events where they are within themselves saying, I think this is going to happen. I think that is going to happen. No, I don't think it's that. You surprise them at one point and say, it's not that, it's this. Mm-hmm. And then it happens at the end. And they go home in the car arguing sometimes. If you end it interestingly, they go home and say, when he said that, I knew this was going to happen.
Yeah.
You hook them.
How do you, when you write in stories like that, and it's funny when you say that because you're like, will he or she lure the partner, his or her partner, to back together? And I was thinking, my brain automatically went to no, because I like the idea of a tragic ending. But at the same time, I'm thinking, but arriving at no is what really pulls your heartstrings. It's like that person could have tried everything.
Right.
And you've seen their journey, like you said, you've seen all the obstacles they've done and then the circumstances that worked against them. And maybe they did everything right. But just because of the circumstance, it tragically was a no,
right,
for whatever reason,
right.
And like that's, I guess, the beauty about the art. But what I'm about to ask is, how do you determine a character's motive? Like obviously people are driven by different things, but how do you sort of get your head in a character? How do you put yourself in a character's head to then decide, well, what is the catalyst for their actions, or what is behind their decision making? How do you sort of deal with that?
Well, that's a process of research sometimes. Sometimes that research would necessitate you coming up with a profile. In a very detailed way. You come up with a profile. What is this character like physically, intellectually, morally, ethically, social class, status in relationships? If it's, let's say, a married couple, what's the power balance like in that couple? All those things you are asking yourself and trying to make a profile. And in that process, you might have to do research. You might have to talk to people. You might be studying a particular kind of person. You might be taking two people that you know and merging them into one. But you must have that profile. You must listen and observe how people talk and their stories and why they do things. Of course, reading is also a major part of the process. And immersing yourself in that. So then it's a similar process, for instance, that actors have to go through. You have a role to play. You have to go analyze that character. You have to know what that character wants. What are the human drives? What are the situational drives? What are the environmental drives that you have? We all are motivated by drives, right? In our lives. Some people have a drive. What's driving them is recognition. Some people, what is driving them is accomplishments. You want to accomplish something, and so on and so forth. We are driven as human beings by various things. So importantly to understand what are these drives that people have, and if you know that person really fully, then you become totally immersed. And then what you do now when you're writing, you allow them to write it for you. The characters to take over. You'll hear great writers talking about that they embody that role of all of the characters, that the characters take over in the writing. It's one of the discomforting things, dissatisfying thing, or when you go to the theater, for instance, is when you hear the playwright talking. There are characters on stage, but everybody's talking like the playwright. All right? Rather than as who they are. So you want that, finding that authenticity. It's about, almost an embodiment, which comes about by through your own research and exploration and awareness of the profile of who these characters are.
Do you think the characters you write particularly are they all different, or do they all have a... Well, I'm sure they're all unique, but is there one thing when you develop a character that has maybe similar traits, or something that you just naturally lean to based on your own experiences? Do you always write, tortured men, or independent women? Like, what is like a character that you sort of tend to lean towards personally?
I don't know.
I'm not trying to pigeonhole you, by the way.
I
I just
know,
want, even if that's a thing,
yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing. Right?
Well, let me just also add that I'm also a director.
Okay.
I direct plays.
Gotcha.
And I do that more than I actually create plays.
Okay.
And I raise that to say that I found over the years that most of the plays that I've directed, and this is not sort of deliberate intent, but looking back on reflection,
Sure.
I find that most of the leading characters are women.
Oh.
And I ask myself why, and I suspect that part of that is that I didn't have much of a relationship with my father. He died pretty early in my growing up, and I grew up with my mother, so I was very close to my mother in every way, as a child and even in my adult years. And then now that I'm teaching, and you know what's happening in the school system, most students in tertiary level are women, and I find that most of the students that I take to this playmaking process that I talk about when they do this project, this one person piece, are females who come to me with an idea that they want to explore to create their play. They have to determine what they want to do. And through them, I learn more about women. And I have to humbly listen as a man to some of these experiences, right? Which, as I said, originates with a problem, with a conflict that this female character has. And so I find that women and the empowerment of women ultimately is women who have a particular dilemma within relationships, to a large extent man-woman relationships, is something that happens in most of my work. As a director, the plays that I select to do, and as a creator with students, the plays that I've helped them to make. And I sort of say maybe that's coming from my relationship with my mother.
But being a that's interesting. You say that being a director, that is sort of leading the narrative or directing the narrative of a woman-led story, isn't that challenging for you? Because, I mean, are there ever moments where, I mean, I'm sure there are, because we as men, we know what our experience is, but if you have a story on women empowerment and her challenges, especially with men, how do you navigate a situation that, that may come about that you just don't have any clue about,
Yeah.
Maybe not no clue, but like it's just something that you don't relate to as deeply because that's not your experience.
Yeah.
So how do you go about directing that? Is it something where you sort of, I mean, you obviously have to be open and responsive, but do you just sort of let go of the reins, or do you gently guide in one direction, or what is your process with themes like that?
I like to think that, as you know, each of us, males and females, we have a feminine side and a masculine side.
Sure.
And I like to feel that my own feminine and masculine side is, and this is what my female friends tell me, is, if not balanced, pretty close to being balanced, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I'm an artist, and from that comes my own sensitivity within the creative process, right? And I think that comes to the fore naturally, I suppose, but also because I'm a listener, and I come to the creation process and my own relationship process with women and men in a very from a place of listening, from a place of listening to other people's point of view, from a place of empathy, right? So they can and recognizing that to be human is to have that kind of balance, is to have that kind of complexity, is to have that kind of sensitivity, right? That the whole civilizing process of the individual and the community and relationship is about balance, is about listening, and it is very evident in the creativity, in the process of creating art. So I found myself that, one of the pieces that I created with two actors was a piece called, which was done in Guyana, I think, Fallen Angel and the Devil's Concubine. There's a piece with two women that I worked with. I directed Sistren Theatre Collective. It was a group of women that asked me to direct a play of theirs where it's about women's issues and their relationships with males. So by their own choice, they saw something that I was bringing to the table. But what they also saw was I prepared to listen to them rather than come and impose, and be a dictatorial director. So that's my process. And I suppose it also came from my own acting, because I was an actor here in Guyana. I started acting before I went to drama school, and I went to be trained as a professional actor and changed and decided I was going to be a director instead. But that process of acting was also critical to that development, because acting, I like to say, is 99% reacting, not the other way around. That's bad acting. Acting is about reacting. So it's about listening with your entire body, with your entire being, you know, which is one of the reasons why actors particularly are sensitive human beings,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah, so in terms of where I find that from to work that way,
Yeah.
that's how I can best answer it.
I know you. I, I read that you left Guyana at 16 to move away.
No, I was older than that
Older than
actually.
that?
Yeah, I was in my 20s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, why did I think you were 16? Or was it that you start acting at the Theatre Guild at 16?
I started acting earlier. I think, yeah.
How did you stumble upon acting
Mm.
how did you stumble into a medium that requires such fluidity, in your an introspection with regards to identity, open-mindedness, as a male in a place like Guyana, that doesn't necessarily. There's always been a community, but society at large has not valued that sort of open-mindedness, expressiveness, different perspective. How did you find yourself in that, in that environment?
Well, it's a mystery when I try to answer that question for myself, and I have had to find the answer to that question on a regular basis because every year students who are doing theater arts at CSEC come to interview me because they have to interview somebody in the theater as part of their SBAs. So that's a question they ask me. And I always tell them that I don't have the fairy tale answer that says that you hear a lot of, Hollywood actors say, well, when I was 4, I knew what I wanted to be. I saw this movie and I wanted to be like that man. I was never that way. The earliest influence, curiosity, I think came when I was, I don't know, 6, 7, listening to radio drama. I grew up in the country, never saw the stage, never acted on the stage, never saw a play, but would listen to the Grace Gibson productions on local radio station. That first there was one called Aunt Mary, a Good Neighbor, and then there was Dr. Paul, And I think what fascinated me there as a youngster listening with my mother to start with was how actors took us on a journey with just their voice because we weren't seeing them. We went on a journey. And so every episode, you went on this journey. And that journey for me was fascinating. But what was also fascinating was how they managed to do that with their voice. And then when I started watching movies, I became interested in it in a more visual way. So, and when I was, I don't know, late teens, early 20s, I decided I want to go to the Theatre Guild, to join the Theatre Guild. But that was triggered by an ad that I saw in the paper for membership. So I went. And I wasn't even thinking I want to act. I wanted to be in this place of creativity and imaginativeness and invention of different worlds.
Yeah.
And so I joined and I was working backstage. And I was mesmerized by what actors were doing. Actors seemed to me like gods. The work that they were doing, they were creating a role. It was just fast. I wasn't anxious to act. I said, you have to learn this damn thing. Yeah. Sometimes they would forget their lines and the way they would just get out of a hole. And when eventually I auditioned for a part, it so happened that it was a larger-than-life play. It was a classic. It was Shakespeare. It was King Lear.
Yeah.
that scared the hell out of me to go on, and I got a lot of little parts that I played and agonized with these few lines that I had. Because when I listen to people like Bill Carr and Claremont Tate, l- um, can't quite remember some of the other names, Billy Pilgrim, say these Shakespearean lines, the poetry, I was fascinated by how they managed to make it sing and make it believable. And I hated the fact that I wasn't getting it right at that stage, and lived through that whole process in workshops at the Guild and so on. So that's my introduction to theater and acting and creating roles. It was a curiosity, it was a fascination, it was this interest in creating new worlds. I like to tell actors, student actors, as an actor, you can go anywhere and do anything and become anybody without actually doing it.
Is it like a form of escapism?
Yeah, I guess it is. I guess it is.
When you left Guyana, you went specifically to pursue this abroad. What was the biggest? Was there any one moment where you did a workshop or had a mentor, spoke to someone in the realm of the creative arts that sort of changed everything you had learned back here? Like, was there anything that enlightened you to a different world within the arts, within this field?
Yeah, there's a mentor. He happened to be the director of the school in Jamaica where I went. Dennis Scott, who's been a mentor for a number of people. Learned a lot from him. He's poet, playwright, dancer, teacher. And one of the central things about his work is that less is more.
Yeah.
Minimalism. That all you need is you and maybe an object, And so his poetry and minimalism and revelation, from the work is one of the things I try to emulate myself. And also, how do you find within yourself, emotional truth? How do you essentially embody a role? As a director, he would get that out to you sometimes in a very simple way, just by dropping an image, finding a particular phrase, Sometimes even a little drawing on a page. He would ignite your imagination and send you places as a director and as a teacher. That's Dennis Scott. I had here some people that did similar things for me. I want to pay tribute to people like Ron Robinson, who directed me here. Father Bernard Gardner, a Jesuit priest, who also directed me here, because I went on to do a lot of major roles on the Theatre Guild stage before I left, in major plays. Ron Robinson, Bernard Gardner, and the Trinidadian guy who was at the time, I think, Deputy High Commissioner at the Trinidadian High Commission, George Mackenzie, directed me in plays like Dream of Monkey Mountain and Moon on the Rainbow Shawl. So I got from them as well an influence, an inspiration that has come to shape my own way of doing my work now. Those guys were instructive in my own shaping of my way of doing things as a theater artist.
Right. Yeah, interesting. I'm thinking about, being a director and pulling out. He talked about, how Dennis used to, would find a way to pull emotions out of you that, maybe you couldn't have gotten to on your own.
Right.
I'm just thinking about how much of a vulnerable space that is, especially when it has to, you are giving something that's real,
Right.
but my portrayal of tragic sadness might be different from yours. But if they're both real, but if you and I are side by side, and my portrayal perhaps isn't as convincing as yours, but it was just as real, if not more. That's a very vulnerable position for me to be in, and I'm just thinking how to put that all on the table for not only approval but for an audience must be such a hard, draining thing to do emotionally.
It is.
I can't imagine having to go in and do that day in, day out.
Yeah.
What that experience
It's
must
not
be
easy.
like.
It's vulnerability is a very critical skill or way of being that an actor has to find. An artist, I would say, generally, because like I said, 99% of acting is reacting, so receiving is important, and you have to be vulnerable to receive an experience and allow it to impact you truly.
Are there limits to that? I mean, like, how do you, if you're drawing on that realness all the time in your practice, is there some compromise you end up having to make in the real world where you just sort of stone up?
Yeah,
I imagine you can't be on the gas all day, every day. You
right,
know what I mean?
right. And when you finish with a role, you have to be able to turn it off.
Yeah.
You don't walk out into the real world that way. I mean, I start off at one point I was teaching acting first year, and that first year for me is about exploration. Some people like to call it about stripping. You strip away the actor, all the conditionings that living in the real world that you've had to put on to protect yourself. Right? You need to strip them away so that you
How do you do that?
Well, a series of exercises. Actor training, particularly in the first year, is about exercises, games to allow you to take risks. You have to be able to take risks. For instance, I always like to say that a really good actor is a dangerous actor. A really good actor comes on stage and makes you feel if you're sitting in the front seat. You just think of Al Pacino. You think of who he is when you see him on a screen or an interview, or Robert De Niro. If you really see them up front, sometimes it can be unnerving for you. You feel kind of nervous. He might do. You feel he might, suddenly just grab your hand or say something to you so naturally that cause your mask to fall. That kind of thing. That is greatness. That person who takes the risk of just bearing themselves, just being there truly.
Yeah.
It's a lot. Beingness is another thing what the acting is about. It's about beingness. You have to find that thing of being in the present.
Sure.
Because the play happens in the present. You just think of two people, two human beings talking to each other. For instance, in the workshop yesterday, there was a young student who's currently in the drama school here, and I was asking her, so what are the things that make make a play? You think, what are the essential ingredients? And she said, exaggeration. Well, that's something else totally. That's I like to put H on the word acting and say that is acting. All right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they see in most of the commercial popular plays.
Yeah.
All right? But having that it can be dangerous, it can be draining, but you need to know when to turn it off. Because you can't go out in the real world and live like that.
Sure, of course.
Right?
Yeah.
But the reason why people come to the
It'd be a
theater
mess.
is to see this thing that they can't see outside.
Yeah.
Or they don't see outside. That's why they come to the theater. You know, theater is a special place
Yeah.
where they can also be themselves. Because that's one of the reasons why you turn off the lights on them.
Yeah.
'Cause
I
if you-
guess you don't have to adhere to societal expectations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, you know, hey, sometimes you're so moved in the play that you cry as a member of the audience.
Of course, yeah.
Not alone, you know, I remember going to the play, a movie once. I went to see Glory years ago with a girlfriend, right? And I was crying in the damn thing. And I was so uncomfortable. Well, she was not yet a girlfriend. You know, I met her a couple of weeks ago. And I thought, wow, this woman's going to see me crying here, you know, see me trying to hide. And, you know, yeah. So it's where you can just go to the theater and sit down in the dark and be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's sometimes when the play and the director forces you to be in the open and they turn on the lights on you. You know, plays and directors do that thing to an audience, you know, depending on what you want to convey.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's risky, but then you need to take risks. That's where the act training takes place.
What's the payoff for like, you know, someone in your position? I mean, is it the validation? Is it the, you know, is it the process? You know, the applause, the renownedness of your work? Like, what drives you to keep doing this? You know, I imagine there's some, for someone that's been doing this as long, like there has to be some underlying thing that just makes you want to get up every day and do it. You know, like what is your motivation?
Well, let me first of all say that in creating productions and plays, there are styles and there are styles. You know, much of what I've been talking about is about realism or naturalism, which is film, and therefore being true and emotionally authentic and so on. But there's also other styles where it's not, you know, you're not getting totally involved emotionally in this character, right?
Yeah.
You're almost on the outside, almost alienating yourself from that and commenting on the character, kind of thing. That's another style of acting, and then there are others and so on. But primarily what you see on film and most theater, it's what we call realistic acting. But to get to your question about the payoff for me, just this morning, I sent a text, a WhatsApp reply to a former teacher of mine. She's now in her 90s. And she would get, now that she's in her 90s and physically incapacitated and stuff, she would every now and then reconnect with her awards that she's had in the past and some that she still continue to get. And she would send them, you know, around and say, I got this. You see these awards. So I was responding to one such this morning. That is a payoff, all right? And I was saying to her, but you know, I think your greatest awards, the greatest achievement is not those decorations. It's your students who've graduated and have become wonderful human beings, productive, creative human beings in the work that they do and the relationships that they have and the transformations that they have made to the world through their teaching or through their art. And when we see them, how we feel about the contribution they are making and that we had something to do with it. We see what they have become. Because that's a process of where that work that you do is now doing something about the world
Yeah.
and the way it is and about humanity. So my greatest payoff are the people who I used to teach, who out of the blue, where was I? I can't remember the event that I was at. Right here, since I've been here, a graduate called me who's now teaching. And I've been talking to her about graduate studies. And she called to say she's ready. And she wants us to talk. She wants advice. And she started to tell me what she wants to do. Where she has now found undergraduate students like to think that when they're 17 and 18, they know what they want to do. But they don't know the world. They don't even know themselves.
Yeah.
They go through undergrad and they discover themselves. And sometimes even after that, when they start to work, now you know what you want to do. And so that, I said, I felt great. Here's growth. You know?
Yeah.
She has learned what she can do, what she wants to do, what is there to be done. She's now ready to really make that impact on the world. That to me is the greatest payoff.
I love how payoffs too can evolve over time throughout your career. You know, like it could start as something egocentric, validation, approval, and then evolves into how many people you could inspire, connect with, how many lives you've impacted genuinely.
Yes. Yeah.
And not to find out right away, but to look back on a career and know I've had an impact. You know, I've genuinely had an impact in people's quietest moments. You know.
And I can tell you one. There's a particular youngster, because I was talking about it in terms of teaching,
Right.
but in terms of directing, there's a young man in the school who is very. He was a problem. He really was a problem as a youngster. He came out of a problematic situation in terms of his community and his family and stuff. But he was bright, smart young man. And I would try desperately work with him, never gave up on him. And then I put him in a play. And he acted in the play and so on. And then I went off to do graduate studies. And I heard, when I was abroad, he went on a summer job in the States. And he ran off. He didn't come back, right? And then he went into community college, and then he went to finish his undergrad, and he went on to do his master's. And when he got his PhD, I was back, and he came in to the office, and he came to see me, and I said, wow, this guy is now going to tell me that when I was beating up on him, that, he's come to show me that he's made something of himself, or, and I, just in case I didn't think he had it in him and so on. And he came in and he said, how are you? And I said, I'm fine. He said, I'm glad to see that you're still here. And I said, yeah, I'm, enjoying what I'm doing and working. He said, well, I have come to say to you that you must keep on doing what you're doing. That you remember when you did this? You remember when you worked on that play? Remember how you believed in me? And he said, those teaching moments are some of the things that kept him. And when he reflects on his own work, he's now an anthropologist, cultural anthropologist. is seeing where it's coming from
Yeah.
in the theater and the work that we were doing. You know,
Imagine that.
yeah,
It's you know, I love that because I've also had people growing up who have give me those moments, you know, like I call them like maybe life defining moments
Right.
where you question who you are and the type of person you want to be. And they're so impactful that I think later in life, when you look back on it, and I look back on some of the mentors, in a weird way, they become so much more than what they were because I give them a whole, you know, they were sort of acted as the foundation of the man I've become, you know. So I in my head, they represent like way beyond what they intended to be, you know, and even what they were in that moment,
right.
you know. And I think that that's so important, you know, which is why I guess like as a teacher, for example, and maybe you can relate, it's like it's so important the moments you have with students and you know what you pass on, because any moment could be that defining moment, and your intentions and whatnot. So
And what happened to me at the Theatre Guild to begin with, from when I went there as a youngster, has been a tremendously formative experience in my life.
yeah,
And if there's anything that I want to say to the powers that be in Guyana, it's about the power of the arts and cultural development in national development, in building a nation and building a civilizing nation. Culture, the arts, needs to be seen as pivotal to national development. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in Jamaica. I've seen it in other societies. And it's critical to recognizing that that word development, sorry, whereas it's about material development in one's life, having things, material things, and the society having material things like roads and buildings and cars and so on. It's, I think, more about people, developing people. Because you can have all these infrastructure, which we need, right? But if you're not having real people development, human development, and you're seeing that there are people in the society, something is wrong with them, or they are aberrations, or they are obstacles, as against using the arts and culture towards the development of people, particularly when you consider that our society here, Guyana, the whole Caribbean, is peopled by transplanted people to this landscape, some of whom have been amputated from their origins, their cosmology, their culture. And cannot be therefore treated with condemnation, when they are important parts of who we are as a nation, and and therefore culture cannot be treated as, and I say this in Jamaica too, as we like to now talk about cultural industry, just the product that you're making to sell, right? But as a process, a continuum.
what does that look like in practice? I mean, you talk about culture and arts, you know, being used to develop society, develop the population as we develop. practically, what does that look like? Because a lot of times we have these conversations in very, and I agree with you, by the way, but I just don't know how to put it into practice because I'm not really an expert or experienced. But there's a lot of airy-fairy language with culture and policy and how the framework for this and that, and it doesn't really. But we're not talking about what are we actually doing, what are we promoting, it's not. We still have to encourage people to do it and be open and be free to act
Right.
on this developmental agenda. How, like, what does that look like in practice? Like, what can
Right.
we
There
do
are
to
models.
push that?
There are models that we can look at. There are parts of Europe that you can see that model. In the Caribbean, Cuba was one such model. If you look at Europe, for instance, if you look at how the arts are treated in Europe, let's take Germany, particularly, US, France, cultures and the arts is a major thing for them. Not just for tourism, but for the values that they consider important to them as a civilization. You see it in China is another model. And the way they treat with culture in all its manifestations, right? And how they, in terms of the nuts and bolts of it, how it is treated in their economy, right? So that, for instance, if you take a place like Germany, Holland, even France, they recognize there's something such as commercial theater. If you just take the theater as an example. But there's also something such as not-for-profit theater, right? Or not-for-profit arts, where funding is crucial. So there's an infrastructure that says, yes, there's going to be that buying and selling, and it's going to, the gate receipts is basically it's going to keep it going. But then there's this other part, this experimental part, this developmental part, this exploration part of the arts that you have to have funding for.
Where does that come from?
The funding?
Yeah.
First, you set up that infrastructure. In the UK, it's the Arts Council, right? In the US, they have less focus on that aspect and more on the commercial.
Sure.
So it's not that easy to get funding in the US, right? For obvious reasons. Capitalism is really.
But there's way more opportunity to commercialize at the same time.
Exactly, right? So that's important. And it's even more so important in developing societies where, by and large, it's what I call a transplanted society, right? Where you are now trying to create nation. See, if you look at that model, say the European model, it is that same power of culture that colonized us. Yeah. It was so powerful that in order for us now to become ourselves, whoever we see ourselves are, that we are as a conglomerate of the Caribbean experience, we have to emancipate our own minds of that thing that colonized us. But the point is that has been so powerful. The culture is so powerful. The culture is not just the money. It's not just the capitalism of it. It's the power of the culture that drove them with their ships and caused them to conquer spaces, the power of the culture. We are in the process now, not of being superpowers necessarily, although some people like to write their cultural policies in those terms. We are still having that whole project of nation building was derailed, that we started from independence and then discovered we're not really independent. That culture was so powerful. We are not going to become powerful by building roads and houses and cars and infrastructure and just having our gold and our bauxite and our oil. That's not going to make us a nation. That's not going to make us powerful as a people with integrity, with confidence. Right? Culture is the thing. You see what it's doing in Jamaica. You know the power of the Jamaican culture.
Yeah.
Right?
Just like how Jamaica was able to find its identity in spite of its colonial past. Is it a situation in Guyana where there's so much diversity in our makeup that it's maybe, because I'm actually reading a book on it right now, but is it like a disadvantage to us that we can't actually root ourselves in any one position? That the differences that we have sort of always fought against each other up until now, that we can't find a common rooted collective anymore, and that's maybe an impediment to this sort of anchoring of a culture.
Again, history can be our lessons. The UK didn't become this, for instance, is a little set of islands, like the UK, that became powerful. It was the most powerful, what do you call it? Empire. Right? This little place. It took years. It took centuries to become that. Right? It's centuries to become that. How old are us? Are we? What? I don't know, 66 to now. So this challenge that we are six peoples and stuff, and we are different, we can do it too. It's not going to happen in a hurry. It's not going to happen in a hurry. And we can't be prescriptive. Say, this is what it should be.
Yeah.
Right? Because we are different. So we have to allow it to evolve. But what that means, that freedom to be, that facilitation of all of it that is there. You understand? So it can't be just about money to produce a play. And we are great because we're getting money to produce a play. That is the end result. That is just marketing.
Yeah.
That product that you're trying to create called culture.
That comes in
called
spite
Guyana.
of money. That's supposed to come in spite of money.
How
yeah.
are you going to cultivate that? That is the cultivation that is critical.
So is it getting more participation in society putting out its own narrative, different groups putting out their own narrative with regards to culture?
It's an enabling process.
Because a lot of people, and it's I'm happy you brought this up, because a lot of people think, like you said, the end product of culture and performance and art is because we need money to do it. And I agree with you, that's not the case. The best art probably is made without money, like it's because you are not compromised by anything, it's coming solely from within. But in Guyana, I think we fight against a lot of obstacles when making art. It's to me, it's even doing a podcast, for example, sometimes it's because of the society we live in, it's difficult to be adventurous. It's difficult to be controversial or bold with good intention. I'm not just mean for being controversial sake and being outrageous. I mean for pushing or for challenging certain school of thought. And by the way, it could be incredibly wrong, but just tabling it sometimes comes as an issue, because people are stuck in one way, and that's, maybe a part of our colonial past, whatever, ignorance, whatever. But, I feel like there has to be some point where we just unapologetically push through all those barriers and scream our art into existence through whatever medium that may be. And that's what's going to, at some point, resonate with people, hopefully.
Yeah. So, building infrastructure then means, yes, the concrete physical infrastructure that the society needs. People need to be fed. People need to be clothed. People need to be whole, but to be housed. But it's the infrastructure now as well for the if you like, the soft sciences, the arts, the things that are about cultivating the values that we consider, intrinsic, endemic to the society. So that, yes, you need the money, but essentially you need a facilitation, an enabling. So it needs the infrastructure for that. So that, for instance, education is crucial. And one of the things that I went traveling up to Berbice, and I was just looking at schools and just loved how schools looked and school children looked. They seemed to be so relaxed. They seemed to be so alive.
Yeah.
I love watching school children here when I'm going home from school. They don't seem haggard and, they got to take 10 buses like in Jamaica to get where they're going, and they're tired and they mash up their clothes all over the place, So that's wonderful. You have the schools. But then the education now is crucial in the process. And to get back to the arts now, you have 3 institutions of learning at tertiary level in the Caribbean for the arts. 1 in Jamaica, 2 in Trinidad. I don't know that since '66 that Guyana has ever sent anybody to be trained in theater. Guyana sent people to be trained in the visual arts. But when you look at '66 to now, it's embarrassing. That needs to be a conscious intention, part of infrastructure in the system. We should have visual arts training, performing arts training from early childhood. That's part of developing cultural industry. That's part of development of people. All right?
For sure.
Because what you're developing in the arts are all the intelligences of the human being. That's what humanizing is about. That's what civilizing is. You're developing your people. More important, perhaps, than physical things. So the education has to be expanded in those terms. And I'm saying, you have, at the school that I taught and attended in Jamaica, almost every tiny island in the Caribbean have sent students there. Some of those students are back now, head of departments of culture, major directors, major cultural managers. No, nobody from Guyana. Probably 2 visual artists I can think of that went. Music? None. Theater? None.
Why do you think that is?
I know when the whole thing started with Burnham and so on, it was setting up, School of Dance was set up. Theatre Guild was there. Nothing was done about theatre, particularly in terms of a school. But there was the local festival, Guy Fest at the time, which I suppose people thought that was training. But I think it's vision and it's education of the main administrative and political directorate in terms of knowing policy making and the way they see development. And it's not only Guyana.
Yeah.
Even a place like Jamaica in current dispensation, again, development is just seen as wall and road and, you know. And so what you're developing, you know, see when you go to America, what you see, high-rise building, nice roads. That's what you see in the developed societies. But really, look, it's more than that.
One question on that, not to get too out there with this theory, but you know, these, if we were to like, who's responsible for that push in culture and art, right? Like, I mean, isn't it like a lot of that born in some countries or places through like a sort of rebellious nature, a sort of a branch that maybe pushes against society, because a lot of art is based on like maybe expression and voicing opinions that perhaps don't conform to the systematic narrative. You know, so in a place like Guyana, is art more likely to be birthed through that sort of rebellious nature, or is it like, you know, more practical to be brought up with the political or governing system of the country? I mean, because for me, I think like if we continue to rely, I'm not saying it has to be rebellious, by the way. By rebellious, I mean artists and creatives go off and do their own thing and make their voices so loud that you can't not hear them. But when we're sort of waiting for the government, let's say, to be the ones to uplift that, then I feel like we'd be waiting in vain, you know, because perhaps that's just not their priority.
Yeah.
You know, so to me, I feel like, you know, like it just has to be like a push, a rebellious push to get your voices heard through whatever medium. You know, I'm not saying go and scream and shout.
So you need lobbies.
Yeah,
you need lobbies.
I mean, you need to sort of you need to build some sort of power and influence within society.
Yeah.
That cannot be ignored.
There needs, first of all, you need dialogue. It's no one. There are models. Again, if you look at the history and you look at these various societies, you're going to see different models. Some models are very dictatorial. You know, I mean, if you look at a place like Singapore, you know, the benevolent leader, dictator. Within democracy, dialogue across the society. So yes, I think one of the things that I hear you saying is the need for participatory democracy. Democracy is not about one man, one vote. That's just one thing, one mechanism. You need participatory democracy. But to have participatory democracy where people are intrinsically participating in the democratic processes of the society, you need pressure groups, you need lobby groups, you need groups that are in dialogue with the political directorate and other interest groups.
So I like where this is going.
Right?
I like where this is going, and I see that. My problem is, and this goes beyond just the culture and arts, you could talk about any lobbying group across sectors, industries. How do you prevent the group from being swallowed up by the system that, you know, because when you're dealing with a population that is looking at, oh, well, you know, is my will for, you know, the arts and the power of expression, you know, is the will for that stronger than my will for just a better life for me personally, because I've sort of endured this level of life for so long. You know what I mean? So it's easy for the powers that be to come in and say, look, like if you shut this down, we'll give you a nice position here. We'll let you lead the arts, you know, and then, you know, they take you and they'll put you in like a culture-led group or whatever it is. And it's just sort of stagnated there because at the end of the day, you're now under the government, let's say, whoever's in charge. So how do groups like this, it has to be the will just has to be so much stronger than whatever.
Yeah.
And I think that's a issue that we face a lot here as a developing country. Like being swallowed up by the system is just so easy. Even educated people, like not to mention if you fight against it, sometimes you can be. We like to use the word victimized here a lot. The system is so accustomed to doing that that you just become, collateral for those actions. So
Yeah.
what are your
I
thoughts?
think there's where you need visionary leadership. Visionary leadership at all levels. There was a time in the Caribbean when you had that kind of leadership, not just the political leadership, but you had cultural leadership. What has happened as all the nation building across the Caribbean became derailed, right, by the rest of the world, by the Western tradition. That generation of cultural leaders that helped to bolster and support political leaders and economic leaders, within which there was the dialogue. That has, those guys have passed on, and now one way of putting it is that Sparrow puts it is capitalism gone mad. All right? But what we need now is still leadership, and not leadership in terms of buying and selling, what we have to sell, what we have to buy, what we have to build, what we have to look good. We need a leadership that is, going to see this thing that I'm talking about that is so important, the development of people and what that means. That you're building a nation, and what that means, building a civilization in its own image, right? What does that mean? We have a vibrant Indian community with all kind of cultural aspects to it that is rich, and you have the same thing with African community. We have that with the Amerindian community. There was a philosophy when it all started, the independence movement and nation building, as to how you can build that nation. Right? That has collapsed. Right? Some things that were built then, it's amazing how they've grown. If you take, I've never seen it since it has grown. I've never been back here to see it. For instance, Pagua. What Pagua has become nationally as something that cross-section of people participating, a national festival almost, when I see videos of it. Powerful. Was never like that. When the Hindus were having their Pagua, you throw some abir and the people, man could kill you. They're totally different things, because a certain kind of system was put in place legally and culturally, structurally, and there's a growth there that has happened. I've seen so many wonderful things that have come out. A lot of people decry what happened was built from the 70s, but I see now a lot of over 180 something nations. Guyana is the only one that can feed itself. I see that has evolved out of something that was a seed that was planted in the society, more than any other society in the Caribbean, for instance, and in the developing world. And that was about building culture. That was about building the arts.
Yeah.
Right? In my own work, for instance, coming out of the Caribbean and the Guyanese experience with the Indo and Afro and European traditions very potent. I e- explored and wrote up a paper which has been published about creating a Caribbean performance technique. All right, coming out of this experience and coming out of what Guyana was emerging from Guyana culturally, is that kind of thing builds nations. That kind of thing builds civilizations, builds culture, builds people and their humanity. You understand? So when you selling, right? When you if you look at a place like China and their arts and their culture, you know, Donald Trump can do what the hell he wants in terms of sanctions and that and you know, even military might.
They're unbreakable.
They're unbreakable.
Yeah. No, it's definitely an interesting thought. I mean, you kind of are kinder to us here when you think about how young we are. And it's frustrating to a lot of people, especially people who've traveled, people who are experienced, people who've seen the world beyond here. You know, so many Guyanese have not even seen beyond Georgetown. But it's changing slowly. They're witnessing us in real time turn into those countries that we see on TV. And, you know, I'm hopeful. I think, you know, it'll have to, the younger generation is going to be the driver behind this cultural push for sure. But I think they need to understand that, you know, like you said, you have to, but like we said, you have to have an unrelenting voice. You have to see the vision that's bigger than just yourself and the immediate, you know, the immediate whatever, the commercialized whatever. But I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic about
And particularly when you think that this country has to be galvanized as a nation, as a people, given the volatile relationship with Venezuela. All right? Certain slogans that we have helps.
Yeah.
Right? I find that there's a stronger sense of patriotism now than, say, 2 decades ago. I might be wrong. My sense is a number of Guyanese want to come back home. I don't know what's attracting them, but
I wonder.
you know. But with that volatility that I'm talking about, you can't stand up to those people militarily.
Yeah.
You can't. You need that other thing.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. I think we don't realize that that's actually a strength to have, and what important, like how important that would be in a geopolitical dispute. You know, who's more likely to, military aside, like which country is more likely to survive? And by survive, I mean the existence of who we actually are.
Right.
You know, is it the how many of a millions in Venezuela with a deep Latin American cultural roots, like despite all their problems, they know who they are. You know, we're still building. We have a lot of internal issues that we need to address sooner than later. And we need to start building our country to where it needs to be. And again, you know, I think this is the perfect time for us to really get it together and capitalize on that. But yeah, you know, I'm hopeful, and I'm glad we had this discussion that started from, you know, the arts to moving the country forward with the arts. So Eugene, I wanna thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope, you know, sometime in the future when you come back, maybe for another sibling's birthday, we could talk again. So thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you soon.
And thank you for having me.
Absolutely.